A warm greeting. Today is Thursday, August 8th, 2024. This is meteorologist Ruben Garcia speaking. In this video, I would like to talk about the possible development of a tropical cyclone in the coming days to the east of the Lesser Antilles, which may threaten the northeastern Caribbean region. This is precisely the area I mentioned in previous videos that we would be monitoring, as a tropical wave currently in the Atlantic is expected to encounter marginally favorable conditions for cyclonic development. This is thanks to a favorable phase of the Madden-Julian oscillation, which currently supports cyclonic activity in the Atlantic and is expected to continue throughout the rest of August. It's important that if you live in the northern Lesser Antilles, Puerto Rico, or the Dominican Republic, you continue to closely monitor forecasts over the coming days, as this represents the first real threat of a tropical cyclone passing near the region during this season. On another note, I briefly wanted to mention that the tropical wave currently over Nicaragua and Honduras has lost its development chances because it has moved over Central America, and the land interaction will not allow it to develop into a tropical cyclone. However, it will still bring heavy rains across the region. Meanwhile, we still have Tropical Storm Debbie, which is currently over North Carolina, causing torrential rains in North Carolina and Virginia, where significant flooding is being reported. Without further ado, let's talk about the Intertropical Convergence Zone, where a low-pressure system is anticipated to develop as it interacts with a tropical wave moving through the region. After several days of monitoring model runs, last night at 2 a.m., the National Hurricane Center marked this area as having a possibility of cyclonic development within the next 7 days. At 2 a.m., they marked a 20% chance of development, and perhaps by 8 a.m. today, these development chances will increase, because all the models develop at least a tropical depression near or over the northeastern Caribbean by the middle of next week. This scenario is very similar to what we saw with the tropical wave that later became Tropical Storm Debbie. However, the conditions in the Atlantic this time are more favorable for development east of the Antilles, unlike Tropical Storm Debbie, which developed in the western Caribbean Sea. This is why it poses a greater threat to the eastern and northeastern Caribbean region. Remember that in this area, especially just east of the Lesser Antilles, sea surface temperatures are very warm, and when that low pressure forms and moves into this area, it will find better conditions for cyclonic development, despite the fact that we still have some Saharan dust present. However, the concentrations are not as high as what we saw in July, so the Saharan dust shouldn't be a major obstacle, especially since the Intertropical Convergence Zone, where the low pressure is expected to develop, currently has a fairly moist atmosphere that can protect the system from the dry air to the west-northwest. However, during the first days of its trajectory toward the Caribbean region, some dry air might interfere a bit with the formation of a tropical depression. Here we can see the projection for next Tuesday, where in brown, we have dry air that could interfere with the circulation of the future low pressure. However, as it approaches the Caribbean region, and as happened with the last strong tropical wave that passed through the region, it could develop thunderstorms near the low pressure, which would result in more favorable conditions for strengthening. Another factor we will be analyzing is that some wind shear could affect the system as it approaches the northeastern Caribbean by mid-next week. But if it maintains a slightly more southerly trajectory, it could encounter below normal wind shear. It will be key to first see where it develops. The sooner and farther east it develops, the more likely it will be to pass toward the northeastern Caribbean. However, if it remains weaker and takes longer to strengthen, it could reach the Caribbean Sea and pose a greater threat to the Lesser Antilles, Puerto Rico, and the Dominican Republic. Let's look at these different scenarios in the global model runs. But before we do, I wanted to invite you to subscribe to my channel. Go to the bottom of the video, click the red button that says subscribe, and then click the bell to receive notifications when I record new videos. Let's begin by looking at the GFS model projection, which already on Sunday night, develops a strong low-pressure system to the east of the Caribbean Sea. Notice how, during the first days of next week, this low pressure strengthens into a tropical depression and tropical storm, and by early Wednesday morning, it potentially becomes a strong tropical storm or Category 1 hurricane, affecting the northern Lesser Antilles, eventually maintaining a trajectory toward the west-northwest. In today's latest run, the GFS model is more aggressive, in this case, showing a Category 2 hurricane passing just northeast of Puerto Rico. This would be on Wednesday night and early Thursday morning. It's important to note that since yesterday afternoon's run, the GFS model has consistently shown a strong tropical storm or hurricane. However, at this time, it's very difficult to pinpoint the exact location of that center of circulation. Nevertheless, in the latest runs, it shows that at least the northern Lesser Antilles, Puerto Rico, and the Dominican Republic should continue to closely monitor the evolution of this future low pressure. What's interesting is that although the operational model is quite aggressive and develops a hurricane by midweek, the GFS model Ensemble members are not as enthusiastic about the idea of cyclonic development. In fact, only about 20% of them have a tropical cyclone moving through the northeastern Caribbean, although those that do show development have a rather strong system. In the latest run, it seems to favor a trajectory over the northern Lesser Antilles and just northeast of Puerto Rico. Remember, as I mentioned, the faster it strengthens, the more likely it is to travel farther to the west-northwest and pass just northeast of Puerto Rico or the Antilles. However, another scenario is shown by the European model. Notice that the European model does develop a low-pressure system to the east of the Lesser Antilles during Monday afternoon, but it has this system much farther west compared to what the GFS model shows. This is because the European model takes longer to develop this system, and in the latest run, it shows a tropical depression developing in the Caribbean Sea around noon next Tuesday, just south of Puerto Rico and crossing over the Dominican Republic between Wednesday and Thursday. The European model shows a tropical depression and tropical storm moving through this region, which is a significant difference from what the GFS model shows. This lets us know that, as usual, there is a lot of uncertainty, which is why we cannot pinpoint the exact trajectory and intensity of this possible future cyclone at the moment. Like the GFS model, the European model has also been fairly consistent in its runs, showing at least a tropical depression developing early next week in the northeastern Caribbean, which increases the chances of development. Even more so when the Ensemble members of the European model all develop at least a tropical depression or tropical storm in the northeastern Caribbean Sea, just south of Puerto Rico and passing near or over the Dominican Republic. In fact, this represents up to a 75% chance of developing a tropical depression early next week in Caribbean waters. And as if that weren't enough, the German model also shows the development of a tropical depression or tropical storm in the latest run, with a trajectory similar to that of the GFS model. Additionally, the UK model also shows a tropical storm or tropical depression crossing over the Dominican Republic on Wednesday morning. The reality is that there is a lot of consensus among the best models that we will see some type of development. That's why I suspect that at 8 a.m., the National Hurricane Center will increase the development chances over the next 7 days, probably to 30%. And even though it is a long-term forecast with much uncertainty, it is important that residents in the northeastern Caribbean, that is, in the northern Lesser Antilles, Puerto Rico, and the Dominican Republic, closely monitor this disturbance. Additionally, we will have several tropical waves that will also have development chances during the 3rd and 4th weeks of August. This is the active period I mentioned several weeks ago. I hope we are all ready for the peak of the season, with hurricane info to keep you informed. Well, with that, I bid you farewell. During the afternoon or evening today, I will record another video to update this forecast. I hope you all have an excellent day.